Hi, I'm Randall. You might know me as
Randy, where are you? Randy!
hang out with Captain Q long enough and you'll end up buying a boat. And I'm no exception. So join me as I navigate the ups and downs of owning an old sailboat. I am taking a little bit of a breather from the normal Captain Q production schedule so that I can do this, which is work on my boat and do some recording. More shame. Do some editing on the footage that I've gathered over the past year. I think it's interesting. If you're not doing a YouTube channel, I still think it's actually really helpful to put together a video diary of your experience. I know that for my own sake and my own learning, filming things and videoing things so I can go back and study. When I was talking with the folks at Yankee Marina, I was recording some of it. So it came in really, really handy to look at how things are connected, to trace things, to get some expert help. I also think that if you're in the same learning curve as me, I think it's interesting to be able to look back at footage of yourself and see how far you've come. And for me, that means I have a good chuckle when I point to something and I refer to it as the wrong thing. I'm referring, oh, there's the bilge pump output line. Nope, that's a sump pump for a shower. You know, it's one of those things where I can see my learning curve in action through this kind of video diary. Hopefully it helps some of you first-time sailboat owners and feel some camaraderie and solidarity with me, who is, you know, down here, and I still have quite a ways to go on the learning curve. As I was going through these bigger learning curves with the diesel and engines and electrical systems, I also needed to do some things that were quick wins, which is, you know, refinishing a piece of wood or just tracing a line back to see where that electrical source was. I think those little short, quick wins help feel like you're building momentum, helps build confidence for me, and maybe you'll find that's something similar as to how you experience your projects. So what I'm going to bring to you today, this episode, is really about the first 6 weeks of having the boat out of the marina and prepping it to take a 200-ish mile journey to keep the boat somewhere closer to my home. It's up in Maine at this point. It's 2.5 hours away, roughly. And I wanted to get it closer to home so that I could get some work done on it and enjoy it more. I want to take a second from talking about water-based yachts and talk a little bit about land-based yachts. Thanks to our friends and returning sponsors, Omaze. We're excited to be working with Omaze because we can offer you a chance to win a custom Mercedes Sprinter van with an eco-friendly VanSmith conversion. Omaze is a sweepstakes-based platform that benefits nonprofits, and this particular promotion will benefit the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. What makes St. Jude so amazing is that unlike other hospitals, the majority of their funding comes from individual contributions. And so sweepstakes-type experiences like this one with Omaze go directly to support their research and treatment of children with catastrophic diseases. It's just remarkable. So it's a good cause, and it also enters you into a sweepstakes to win this 4x4 with 7-speed, 3-liter turbo diesel. It's got an isotherm 85-liter fridge. It has a Flamma side awning, which is super handy if it's really sunny out and warm. The standing height is just a little bit over 6'4". It has a 24-gallon fuel tank. It has everything you need to go totally off the grid. It's got a whole solar package. The total approximate retail value is $150,000 for the package. Go off the grid, go wherever you want to go. So for your chance to win a custom Mercedes Sprinter van and support a great cause, head to omaze.com/yachthunter. The experience closes on January 27th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thanks again to Omaze for sponsoring and helping us bring the show to you. And now back to water-based yachts. I got here and the whole cockpit was swamped. So my boat has 4 scupper holes located in each corner of the cockpit. The port side is combined down below inside the hull to connect to one through hull. The starboard side is connected together and has one through hull output on the starboard side. The cockpit was swamped with water, and I was a little too frazzled to pick up a camera and start recording, but I would say there was probably about 40 or 50 gallons of water that had come up over the top of the cockpit grate. And I did the hand bilge pump, and something blasted out and got clear out of the scuppers. I was a bit overwhelmed by everything that was going on with the boat. I was really frustrated. I did get the manual bilge pump to clean out the cockpit, but in the back of my mind, I was like, man, my scuppers are not draining. I need to have that, when I leave the boat for a little bit, I got to have the cockpit draining. So what I did today was I actually just took the cockpit sole grate. I had to kind of disconnect the binnacle just to get the cockpit grate up. So what I discovered was the cockpit itself has a ton of leaves and debris from being under a bunch of trees last fall. So it was really close to the tree line, and that makes sense. So trees, pine needles, etc., got into underneath the cockpit grate, and they drain right towards the scupper. And sure enough, there's even a scupper that you can't quite even tell it's a scupper. It's just a little cluster of leaves. As you can see, these just filthy. And actually, the whole boat is filthy.
You filthy animal.
After this, I have a whole bunch of other things I need to do. It's a bit overwhelming. My list is really long. What I'm going to do is scrub this down, try to get the stuff out of the cockpit, and then I'm going to flush it through with a bunch of water. I'll do a little scrubbing and cleaning and get this cockpit scuppers working and get the cockpit sole back into place. So the lesson here is keep an eye on your scuppers and make sure that there's not a lot of junk clogging them up, especially if your scupper holes are not terribly visible, like mine that are underneath the cockpit grate most of the time. First rule of boat club, keep water out of the boat. So what I discovered with the trip from the launch day was that the bilge pump really wasn't functioning properly. It was creating some kind of frothy, soapy mix, and I presume somebody had put some bilge cleaner in there before, and there was probably some soap residue, but it was getting a lot of aeration, and I noticed it wasn't pumping much overboard either, and then as it's coming up through the floorboards, I would have thought that it would have been pumping out like crazy, and it wasn't. So to me, that meant my main bilge pump, which is housed in the main bilge of the main cabin, kind of near the base of the mast, wasn't functioning properly. So number one, I want to get the bilge pump working. So we've got a little bit of a puzzle now. I've got to figure out whether it's the fluid that's not pumping out because there's a clog in the hose, or maybe the pump isn't functioning properly, or is this an electrical issue? I did have a little bit of a hint from the previous owner who left in the notes that one of the bilge pumps had a finicky switch. So there are 3 bilge pumps on the boat. I've got to then trace where that switch lives. It's not as straightforward as you might think. One cool thing about this layout is that the bilge is so deep, I can't get my hand on that bilge pump. So someone was smart enough to put it on an aluminum sheet that goes right down to the bilge, and so you could grab this and pull it up to get better access to the pump.
Pretty good.
The downside of the installation was it was just loosely zip tied, and the electrical wiring was just roaming free. It wasn't secured down at all. The murky bilge water is making this really hard to trace where the hoses are going. There's a lot going on down there. So I thought the first order of business would be to drain all the water out of the bilge and then get as much lighting on it as I could so I could trace where the hose went into the hull. And then on top of that, I want to trace the electrical to make sure I know where that's going. And this is a super curious archaeological find. I was vacuuming up and there was a piece of twine in the bottom, and it turns out the twine was lashed down to the bottom of the bilge pump, and you could not get the bilge pump up out of the bilge because the twine in the dark shadows was holding it down. And that took me at least 30 minutes to figure out what was going on. But it only took me about 4 seconds to get my frustrations out with the saw and cut that thing loose. Whew! That was something. Talk about wrestling that thing. It's water-soaked twine with skunk and stuff, really slippery. So at this point, being on the mooring, I thought the easiest thing might be to take what seemed like a good pump, make sure the wiring was all good, and then put it back in place. Now that I understand how it's put together, put it back and maybe fasten it down and secure it a little bit better, and maybe that'll just make it work. So with fresh soldered wires and a newly fastened bilge pump. I put the bilge pump down in the bilge, and then I dumped in 10 gallons of fresh water to test it out, and had no luck. I could hear the pump firing, but no water was coming out, and I could read that the electricity was getting to the pump. So obviously I need to make the decision to go grab a new pump and install it. While I'm at it, I'm going to throw in a new bilge pump switch once I find exactly where that switch is. After spending a bunch of days getting knocked around on a very lumpy mooring, I decided to take it to a dock and give myself a more stable place to work. The bilge line output looks like it goes underneath the holding tank, so I've got to take up more floorboards to trace where that goes. I actually have a suspicion that it goes to the port side.
Or Randay, that is. Incorrect.
You can see what's super helpful here is this yellow stripe on the output line. You can trace that, thanks to the yellow, through the bilge, and then it follows and goes up into the starboard forward hanging locker. So I was pretty happy with that being okay, and so the next step was to then trace the electrical. Down and along the cabin sole underneath, and then I could see that it goes in there under the head. This is the forward head on the port side, and then it comes up through here. So it goes up into the forward V-berth and comes out here, and you can see here's my green, white, and black. Black is going to a ground up here, some batteries, and then the green and white go to a board here, and voila, we have a bilge pump override here. It's currently set to automatic. So I didn't know that existed. The whole system has to be powered by another feed. So that's where I'm at. Finding that my electrical panel is going to be kind of a nightmare unless I can find something up here. So not really sure. But happy to be at a dock and not getting bounced around. So even though it's taken me a couple days to get to this point, I'm feeling pretty good because now I'm more knowledgeable. I've traced the fluid output line to the through hull, and I've now traced the electrical back to the bilge pump switch, and I've even traced that the bilge pump is directly wired to one of the V-berth batteries, which is not ideal, but at least I know where it is. Now I'm going to change the installation a little bit. I'm going to modify that aluminum sheet. I'm going to cut off the bottom of the L, and I'm just going to use some zip ties to securely mount the pump so that there's no torque action going on. I'm also going to get an adapter for the pump so that the output is turning and going straight up. That way my really stiff hose doesn't end up torquing the whole pump if there's any movement of the hose. I'm going to buy and install a brand new bilge pump switch. I'm also going to solder the connections and then put waterproof heat shrink tubing around those connections to make sure that they're impervious to water. I'm then going to take the aluminum sheet and I'm going to mount it to the bulkhead with 2 stainless steel bolts with wing nuts so that I can quickly get at it without any tools. I want these things accessible and easy in case of an emergency. I could also quickly replace the pump with a spare pump that I'll keep on board. Being at the dock was great because then I could then flood the bilge with a hose and then watch the bilge pump empty it out. And I did that 3 or 4 times just to make sure everything was fully functional. I have a lot of peace of mind having tested it 3 or 4 cycles with flooding the bilge with fresh water from a dock. There are not many things more important on a sailboat than a really good working bilge pump. And not only that, but to have a really good relationship with that bilge pump is pretty important in case of any type of emergency. I feel very good about the installation right now. It's not ideal, but it feels safe and very easy to remedy if something were to go awry. So here are a couple things that I learned with this exercise. One, I learned to trace things throughout the hull, and that was really time consuming, but really, really valuable. The problem was really 2 parts. One, I have a finicky, faulty switch, which needed to be replaced. And number 2, my pump was actually being torqued and fastened down in such a way that it eventually wore out and would crack apart. You can see here, just even with a little bit of force, without even pushing in on the tabs, the pump opens right up. Replacing these two things, the switch and the pump, and then configuring it in such a way that makes it a lot safer, gives me a lot of peace of mind. And that's really the bottom line with all this. We just want to be as safe as possible and give ourselves as much opportunity to fix things quickly if they go awry. Bilge pump, that took a little bit longer than I thought. I was estimating like, oh, it's like a 3 or 4 hour project. I think I have some ideas. I'm going to pop in a new pump. No, it was like a 3-day project. It was a little bit demoralizing, but in the end, I was pretty happy with the solution. It works, still works. I'm a little judgy about whoever set this boat up last. It's,
This stinks. It's your fault. It's your fault.
but hey, it's a starting point. At least it's something I can deal with. Hope you enjoyed this. I really appreciate you all watching, and I really appreciate the feedback and solidarity that everyone has commented and left their thoughts and their own similar experiences. Coming up next, I've got more safety fixes on the way before I make my big voyage.